The silence in our apartment used to be a comfortable quiet, a shared understanding. Now, it's a heavy, pregnant silence, thick with unspoken words and a growing unease I can't quite place. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Elena's late nights at the office, for instance. While she's always been dedicated to her work, lately it's become excessive. She'd come home, eyes shadowed with exhaustion, offer a brief, distracted kiss, and then retreat to the spare bedroom, claiming she needed to catch up on emails. The spare bedroom, that's new. We've always shared our bed, even when one of us was restless or had a bad night. Now it feels like a deliberate separation, a chasm widening between us while I pretend to sleep, my back to her empty side of the bed. Then there's the change in her demeanor. She's different, less present. Her laughter, once a bright, infectious sound that filled our home, is now rare, replaced by a strained politeness. She seems preoccupied, her thoughts always elsewhere. When I try to talk to her about it, about us, she deflects, offering vague assurances and brushing off my concerns as paranoia. "You're imagining things," she says, her voice a little too high, a little too quick. "I'm just stressed about work." But I know it's more than work. I can feel it in the way she avoids my gaze, in the way her hand flinches when I reach for hers. It's a feeling deep in my gut, a cold, gnawing suspicion that something is terribly wrong. It's not just the big things, either. It's the small, almost insignificant details that are starting to add up. The new perfume she's wearing, a scent I don't recognize and that lingers in the air long after she's left for work. The cryptic text messages that flash across her phone screen, messages she quickly deletes before I can see them. The way she flinches when I touch her, as if my touch has become unwelcome. It's like she's a different person, a stranger inhabiting the body of the woman I love. And the worst part is I don't understand why. What have I done? Where did we go wrong? These questions echo in the silence of our apartment, unanswered, fueling the whispers of doubt that are slowly eroding my peace of mind. I feel like I'm standing on the edge of a precipice, waiting for the inevitable fall, but I'm blindfolded, unable to see what lies below. The whispers have become a constant hum, a background noise to my life. I try to ignore them, to push them away, but they're persistent, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. I find myself scrutinizing Elena, analyzing her every move, searching for clues, for confirmation of my fears. It's a torturous game, a self-inflicted form of mental anguish. I hate myself for it, for becoming this suspicious, paranoid version of myself, but I can't seem to stop. One evening, Elena came home later than usual. "Meeting ran late," she explained, not meeting my eyes. I nodded, feigning acceptance, but my mind was racing. Who was she meeting with? What was so important that it couldn't wait? I decided to do something I'd never done before. I checked her phone. I know it's a violation of privacy, a breach of trust, but I was desperate. I needed answers. Her phone was locked, of course. But then I remembered something she'd mentioned weeks ago, a new app she was trying out, a calendar app that synced across devices. I grabbed my laptop and opened the app's website. There it was, her calendar synced and visible. My heart pounded in my chest as I scrolled through the entries. Work meetings, appointments, the usual. Then I saw it. A recurring entry, every Wednesday evening, simply labeled project meeting. But the location? The location was a small, upscale restaurant downtown, a place Elena had never mentioned before, a place far from her office. My stomach dropped. A project meeting at a restaurant? Felt wrong. I took a screenshot of the calendar entry, a cold knot forming in my gut. I knew I couldn't confront her with it directly. Not yet. I needed more. I needed proof. So I started following her. I know it sounds crazy, like something out of a bad movie, but I was desperate. Every Wednesday evening, I'd tail her, keeping my distance, watching as she parked her car near the restaurant and went inside. I never went in myself. I couldn't bring myself to do it. I just watched, my heart breaking a little more each week. I saw her laugh, her face animated, engaged in conversation. A version of Elena I hadn't seen in months. a version of Elena that wasn't mine anymore. The whispers had become a roar, deafening, confirming my worst fears. I was being betrayed. But by whom? And why? The questions swirled in my mind, a toxic cocktail of suspicion and pain. The weekly ritual of following Elena became a twisted form of self-torture. Each Wednesday, I'd watch her enter the restaurant, my stomach clenching with a mixture of dread and a perverse curiosity. I needed to know. I needed to see who she was meeting, but I couldn't bring myself to cross that threshold. It felt like crossing a line, a point of no return. As long as I didn't see it with my own eyes, a small part of me could still cling to denial, to the hope that I was wrong. One particularly cold Wednesday evening, I sat in my car across the street from the restaurant, the windows fogged with my breath. I watched as Elena arrived, looking radiant, a smile playing on her lips. She seemed happy. A pang of jealousy, sharp and visceral, pierced through me. Who was making her so happy? After what felt like an eternity, I saw them leave the restaurant. Elena and a man. He was tall, with dark hair and a confident stride. They were laughing, their bodies close. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language spoke volumes. They were intimate, comfortable with each other. The man put his arm around Elena's shoulders, and she leaned into him. It was a casual gesture, the kind of gesture shared between people who knew each other well. Too well. I watched them walk down the street, their figures disappearing into the night. I felt numb, my mind blank. The whispers had finally coalesced into a stark, undeniable truth. Elena was cheating on me, with this man. I didn't know who he was, but it didn't matter. The betrayal was real, a physical blow that left me gasping for air. I sat in my car for a long time, the engine off, the silence broken only by the occasional passing car. I replayed the scene in my mind, over and over again, each time feeling the same sharp pain, the same sense of disbelief. How could she do this to me? To us? What had I done to deserve this? Finally, I started the engine and drove home. The apartment felt empty, cold. Elena wasn't there. I sat in the living room, staring at the photos on the mantelpiece. Photos of us happy, smiling. Photos of a life that now seemed like a lie. I picked up a photo of Elena, her face radiant, her eyes full of love, or what I thought was love. I looked at her face, searching for a clue, a sign, anything that would explain what had happened. But there was nothing, just a beautiful face, masking a secret that had shattered my world. I put the photo down, my hands shaking. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go from here. All I knew was that my life had irrevocably changed. The whispers had become a scream, a deafening roar that echoed in the emptiness of my heart. The days that followed were a blur. I moved through life in a daze, a ghost haunting my own existence. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The image of Elena and the man, their laughter, their intimacy, played on a loop in my mind, a constant reminder of her betrayal. I tried to function, to go to work, to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but it was a futile effort. My concentration was shot, my mind consumed by a single, all-encompassing thought. Elena. I oscillated between anger and despair. One moment I would be consumed by rage, fantasizing about confronting her, about making her pay for what she had done. The next, I would be overwhelmed by a crushing sadness, a sense of loss so profound it felt like a physical ache. I mourned the loss of Elena, the woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew. I mourned the loss of our life together, the future we had planned. I mourned the loss of myself, the man I used to be before the whispers began. I tried to talk to Elena, to understand, to get some answers. But every attempt ended in frustration. She would deny everything, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. "You're being ridiculous," she would say, her voice sharp. "I don't know what you're talking about." Her denials only fueled my anger, my sense of betrayal. I felt like I was losing my mind, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I started drinking. It was a pathetic attempt to numb the pain, to escape the reality of my situation. But the alcohol only made things worse. It amplified my emotions, making the anger more intense, the despair more profound. I would sit alone in our apartment, a bottle of whiskey my only companion, the silence a constant reminder of Elena's absence. I knew I couldn't go on like this. I was spiraling down, sinking deeper into an abyss of despair. I needed to do something, to take control, to find a way out. But what? The question hung heavy in the air, unanswered, a testament to my helplessness. I felt lost, adrift in a sea of pain, with no land in sight. The whispers had become a storm, raging inside me, threatening to consume me entirely. One morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a mouth like dry parchment. I stumbled to the bathroom, my reflection in the mirror a shocking sight. Bloodshot eyes stared back at me, hollow and lifeless. My face was pale, gaunt, etched with the lines of exhaustion and despair. I looked like a stranger, a shell of the man I used to be. The sight of my own reflection triggered something within me. A spark of defiance, a flicker of anger directed not just at Elena, but at myself. I had allowed myself to become this pathetic, broken creature. I had allowed Elena's betrayal to define me, to consume me. It was time to stop. It was time to reclaim my life. I made a decision that day, a decision to fight back. Not with violence, not with anger, but with something far more powerful: indifference. I would no longer allow Elena's actions to dictate my emotions. I would no longer let her betrayal define me. I would detach myself from her emotionally and physically. I would become the master of my own destiny. It wasn't easy. The pain was still there, a constant ache in my chest. But I refused to let it control me. I started taking care of myself again. I forced myself to eat, to exercise, to get out of the apartment. I started reconnecting with old friends, with hobbies I had neglected. I began to rebuild my life, piece by piece, brick by painful brick. I still watched Elena, but with a different perspective. I observed her with a detached curiosity, like a scientist studying a fascinating but dangerous specimen. I noticed the subtle changes in her behavior, the way she seemed more agitated, more on edge. I saw the cracks in her facade, the moments of doubt and insecurity that she tried to hide. I realized that her betrayal wasn't just about me. It was about her own unhappiness, her own insecurities. It was a reflection of her own flaws, not mine. This realization was both liberating and heartbreaking. It freed me from the burden of guilt and self-blame, but it also deepened my sadness. I had loved Elena, truly loved her. But the woman I loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who was incapable of love, of loyalty, of honesty. The woman I loved was a ghost, a memory that haunted the empty spaces of my heart. The mask of indifference I wore became my shield, protecting me from the pain of Elena's betrayal. I treated her with a polite distance, a carefully constructed facade of normalcy. We went through the motions of our life together, sharing meals, sleeping in the same bed, though with a growing chasm between us, exchanging perfunctory conversations. But the intimacy was gone, replaced by a chilling formality. Elena seemed to notice the change in me. At first, she seemed relieved, almost grateful for the lack of confrontation. But as the weeks turned into months, a flicker of unease began to creep into her eyes. She would try to engage me in conversation, to draw me out, but I would deflect her attempts with polite disinterest. I could see the frustration growing within her, the confusion in her face. It was a small victory, a subtle shift in the power dynamic that had once defined our relationship. I continued to observe her, to study her. I noticed the way she would flinch when I entered the room, the way she would avoid my gaze. I saw the guilt and shame that she tried to hide behind a mask of bravado. It was a slow, agonizing process, watching the woman I loved crumble under the weight of her own deceit. But I felt no satisfaction, no sense of triumph. Only a profound sadness, a deep ache in my heart. I realized that my indifference was not a sign of strength, but a symptom of my own pain. It was a defense mechanism, a way to protect myself from the overwhelming emotions that threatened to consume me. Despite the pain, I knew I was on the right path. I was reclaiming my life, my identity. I was no longer defined by Elena's betrayal, by her actions. I was becoming my own man, independent and strong. The mask of indifference was a necessary step in my journey, a temporary shield that would eventually fall away, revealing the healed and resilient man beneath. While I focused on rebuilding my own life, I couldn't completely ignore the situation with Elena. The mask of indifference was effective, but it couldn't fully conceal the questions that lingered in my mind. Who was this man she was seeing? What was the nature of their relationship? Was it just a fling, a momentary lapse in judgment, or something more serious? My curiosity, once a source of pain, now became a tool. I started paying closer attention to Elena's routines, her habits, her conversations. I listened for clues, for any hints that might reveal the identity of her lover. I noticed the way she would sometimes linger on the phone, her voice hushed, her expression guarded. I observed the way she would dress up for her project meetings, her eyes sparkling with an anticipation that had nothing to do with work. One evening, I overheard a snippet of conversation as she was getting ready to leave. She was talking on the phone, her voice low but urgent. "Can't wait to see you," she whispered. "Miss you so much." The words hung in the air, a sharp reminder of her betrayal. But this time there was something different. A note of desperation in her voice, a hint of vulnerability that I hadn't heard before. It was then that a new suspicion began to take root. What if Elena wasn't just having an affair? What if she was planning to leave me? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. The prospect of losing her completely, of being abandoned, was more terrifying than the betrayal itself. I started digging deeper, searching for evidence to confirm or deny my suspicions. I checked her phone records, her emails, her bank statements. I looked for any signs of a secret life, a hidden relationship that she was trying to conceal. The more I investigated, the more convinced I became that something was amiss. There were inconsistencies in her stories, gaps in her schedule, unexplained expenses. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, painting a picture that was both disturbing and heartbreaking. The seeds of suspicion, once planted, grew quickly, taking root in the fertile ground of my pain and insecurity. They fueled my determination to uncover the truth, to expose Elena's secrets, no matter the cost. I knew that the path ahead would be difficult, fraught with danger and uncertainty. But I was no longer the broken man I had been. I was a man on a mission, driven by a thirst for knowledge and a desire for justice. My investigation into Elena's secret life became an obsession. I spent hours poring over her phone records, tracing calls to unknown numbers, analyzing text messages that hinted at a clandestine relationship. I delved into her emails, searching for clues in the seemingly innocuous exchanges with colleagues and friends. I scrutinized her bank statements, looking for unusual transactions, unexplained withdrawals, and hidden accounts. The deeper I dug, the more intricate the web of deceit became. Elena had become a master of deception, weaving a complex tapestry of lies and half-truths to conceal her affair. She used code words and secret email addresses to communicate with her lover. She created elaborate alibis to explain her absences, her late nights, her secretive phone calls. She manipulated her schedule, her finances, her very life to maintain the illusion of normalcy. I felt a strange mix of admiration and disgust. Admiration for her cunning, her ability to maintain such a complex charade. Disgust at her betrayal, her willingness to sacrifice our marriage, our trust, for her own selfish desires. One evening, I stumbled upon a hidden folder on her laptop. It was password protected, but I managed to crack the code with a combination of guesswork and online tools. My heart pounded in my chest as I opened the folder. Inside, I found a treasure trove of evidence. Intimate photos of Elena and her lover, love letters, travel itineraries, even financial documents that revealed they were planning to buy a house together. The discovery was like a punch to the gut, confirmed my worst fears. Elena wasn't just having an affair. She was planning to leave me, to start a new life with this other man. The realization sent a wave of anger and betrayal washing over me. I felt like I had been living a lie, a carefully constructed illusion designed to keep me in the dark while she plotted her escape. But amidst the anger and pain, a new resolve began to take hold. I would not be a victim. I would not let Elena walk away from our marriage without consequences. I would expose her lies, her deceit, her betrayal. I would make her pay for the pain she had caused me. The mask of indifference began to crack, revealing the simmering rage that had been building within me. The time for passive observation was over. The time for action had arrived. Despite the rage that burned within me, I knew I couldn't act rashly. Elena was cunning, and I needed to be careful. I needed a plan, a strategy that would expose her deceit and leave her with no escape. I spent the next few days meticulously gathering evidence, documenting her every move, her every lie. I tracked her phone calls, her emails, her online activity. I followed her to her clandestine meetings with her lover, taking photos and videos as proof of their affair. I also started to research divorce lawyers, financial advisors, and private investigators. I wanted to be prepared for every eventuality, to ensure that I was protected legally and financially. I knew that the divorce would be messy, that Elena would fight tooth and nail to keep her secrets hidden and to secure a favorable settlement. But I was determined to fight back, to expose her lies and to protect my own interests. As I gathered evidence and built my case, a strange sense of calm descended upon me. The initial shock and despair had given way to a cold, calculating determination. I was no longer the heartbroken husband, reeling from the betrayal. I was a strategist, a warrior preparing for battle. The mask of indifference had fallen away completely, replaced by a mask of resolve. I continued to live with Elena, to maintain the facade of normalcy. But our interactions were now charged with a different kind of tension. She seemed to sense the shift in me, the change in my demeanor. She became more cautious, more guarded. Her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. I knew that the confrontation was inevitable, that the storm was brewing on the horizon. But I was ready for it. I had gathered my weapons, prepared my defenses, and steeled my resolve. I would not be defeated. I would not be broken. I would emerge from this ordeal stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. The tension in our apartment had become palpable, a thick, suffocating blanket of unspoken words and simmering resentment. Elena and I moved around each other like wary adversaries, our every interaction a carefully choreographed dance of avoidance and veiled hostility. I knew that the charade couldn't last much longer, that the truth would inevitably erupt, shattering the fragile peace we had maintained. One evening, as Elena was getting ready for another project meeting, I decided to confront her. I had reached my limit, the burden of her deceit becoming unbearable. I waited until she was almost ready to leave, her coat on, her purse in hand. Then, I calmly walked into the living room, my hands clasped behind my back, my face an impassive mask. "Elena," I said, my voice steady and controlled, "we need to talk." She froze, her back to me, her shoulders tense. I could see her reflection in the mirror, her eyes wide with alarm. She slowly turned around, her face a carefully constructed mask of innocence. "What is it?" she asked, her voice a little too high, a little too brittle. "I know about your affair," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. The mask crumbled. Her eyes widened in shock, her mouth opening and closing wordlessly. She tried to speak, to deny, but the words wouldn't come. "I know about him," I continued. "About your plans to leave me, about the house you're buying together." I laid out the evidence piece by piece like a prosecutor presenting his case. I showed her the photos, the videos, the emails, the financial documents. I detailed her every lie, her every deception, her every betrayal. Elena listened in stunned silence, her face pale, her body trembling. When I was finished, she sank onto the sofa, her head in her hands. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by a crushing sense of defeat. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," I said, my voice rising in anger. "You hurt me deeply. You betrayed my trust, our love, our vows. You shattered our life together." The dam had broken. The rage that had been simmering within me for months erupted. A torrent of accusations, recriminations, and pain. I poured out my heart, unleashing the hurt, the anger, the betrayal that had been consuming me. Elena listened, her head bowed, tears streaming down her face. She offered no excuses, no justifications. She simply sat there, absorbing the full force of my anger, the consequences of her actions. The confrontation was cathartic, a release of pent-up emotions that had been poisoning my soul. But it also marked a turning point, a decisive break from the past. The illusion of our marriage was shattered. The truth laid bare. There was no going back. The only way forward was through the pain, through the wreckage of our broken dreams, towards a new beginning. The aftermath of the confrontation was like a battlefield after the war. The air was thick with the smoke of burnt bridges, the silence punctuated by the echoes of shattered trust. Elena, stripped bare of her lies and deceit, was a shadow of her former self. The vibrant, confident woman I had fallen in love with was gone, replaced by a hollow shell, haunted by guilt and regret. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, her eyes downcast, her movements listless. She barely spoke, her voice a mere whisper, her words laced with a deep sadness. She tried to apologize, to explain, but the words seemed hollow, devoid of meaning. The damage was done, the trust irrevocably broken. I watched her, my heart a mixture of pity and anger. Pity for the woman she had become, the woman she could have been. Anger at the pain she had caused, the life she had destroyed. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were observing the scene from a distance, a spectator to my own tragedy. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Elena offered no resistance, no fight. She signed the papers without hesitation, her signature a final surrender, an acknowledgement of her defeat. She moved out of the apartment, leaving behind a trail of memories, ghosts of a life that had vanished like smoke. The apartment felt strangely empty without her. The silence, once a source of comfort, now echoed with her absence. I wandered through the rooms, touching the furniture, the walls, the objects that held the remnants of our life together. Each touch was a reminder of what I had lost, of the future that had been stolen from me. I started the process of rebuilding my life one day at a time. I focused on my work, my friends, my hobbies. I sought therapy, trying to make sense of the pain, the betrayal, the loss. It was a slow, arduous journey, fraught with setbacks and challenges. But I persevered, driven by a determination to heal, to move on, to find happiness again. The empty shell that Elena had become haunted me for a long time. But gradually, the memories faded, the pain subsided, and the anger gave way to a quiet acceptance. I realized that forgiveness was not about condoning her actions, but about freeing myself from the burden of the past. It was about letting go of the anger, the resentment, the pain, and embracing the possibility of a new future. Months turned into a year, and the sharp edges of pain began to soften. The divorce was finalized, the legal battles concluded. I had moved to a new apartment, a fresh start in a new space. The memories of Elena still lingered, but they no longer held the same power over me. I was moving on, slowly but surely, rebuilding my life, rediscovering myself. One Saturday afternoon, I was browsing in a bookstore when I saw her.
Elena.
She was standing by the poetry section, her back to me, her hair a little longer, her figure a little thinner. My heart skipped a beat, a familiar ache returning to my chest. I hesitated, unsure whether to approach her, to acknowledge her presence. As if sensing my gaze, she turned around. Our eyes met, and a wave of emotions washed over me. Surprise, sadness, a flicker of the old love, and a lingering resentment. She looked older, more tired, the sparkle in her eyes replaced by a quiet sadness. We stood there for a moment, frozen in time, the years melting away. Then, she smiled, a tentative, fragile smile. "Hello," she said, her voice soft, hesitant. "Elena," I replied, my voice a little rough with disuse. We talked for a while, catching up on each other's lives. She told me about her new job, her new apartment, her attempts to rebuild her life. She spoke of regret, of remorse, of the pain she had caused. I listened, my heart softening, the anger fading. I told her about my own journey, about the challenges I had faced, the progress I had made. I spoke of forgiveness, of acceptance, of the hope for a better future. We parted ways with a lingering hug, a gesture of closure, of forgiveness. As I watched her walk away, I felt a sense of peace, a release from the burden of the past. The encounter was unexpected, a chance meeting that had brought us face to face with our shared history, our shared pain. But it was also a reminder that life goes on, that wounds heal, that forgiveness is possible. The encounter with Elena was a turning point, a final chapter in the story of our relationship. It allowed me to let go of the last vestiges of anger and resentment, to embrace the possibility of healing and moving on. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for redemption, for forgiveness, for a new beginning.